Who's fighting for landlords? Canada's biggest landlord advocate speaks out. Welcome back to the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. I'm your host, Irwin Cito, and today we're diving into one of the most important conversations for landlords and real estate investors. Who's actually fighting for us? Between rising costs, rent control, landlord-tenant board delays, and policy changes that make it harder to operate rental properties, it's no surprise that many landlords feel they're being left behind. But there are people advocating for us, working behind the scenes to shape fair policies and ensure that rental housing remains a viable investment. That's why I'm thrilled to have Tony Irwin on the show today. His name is also Irwin. Super cool name, by the way. Tony is the president and CEO of both the Canadian Federal Apartment Association, the CFAA, and the Federal Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario, FRPO for short, FRPO, FRPO. Two of the largest organizations advocating for landlords and rental housing providers at both the national and provincial levels. That's why it's super cool to have Tony on this show. He represents two levels of regions in Canada. Anyways, with years of experience in policy, government relations, and housing advocacy, Tony is at the forefront to fight to protect landlords, encourage rental supply, and push back against policy that makes it harder to provide housing. In this episode, we get into the current state of Ontario and Canada's rental markets, why rent control and landlord-tenant board delays are making investing more challenging, what the CFAA and FRPO, FRPO, are doing to push for fairer policies, what landlords can do to get involved and protect their investments, including we're going to talk about a golf tournament as well. If you own rental properties or are thinking of investing, this is a must-listen episode. The policies being decided today will impact your bottom line for years to come. But before we get to our guests, I want to take a quick second to share something valuable with you. If you're serious about building wealth through real estate but struggling to find profitable investments in Canada, I've got something that will help. I've put together a comprehensive guide to U.S. real estate investing for Canadians, breaking down the best markets, financing strategies, tax considerations, and landlord-friendly states where Canadians are getting better cash flow and long-term appreciation. It's completely free. You can grab your copy at www.truthaboutrealestateinvesting.ca. Just look for it on the right side of the page. Along with the guide, you'll also get our weekly newsletter that goes out to over 10,000 Canadians at no charge since 2010. Yes, I've been sending it for every week since 2010. We send new podcast episodes as they're released, so you never miss out on these expert insights, invites to exclusive in-person and online events with top real estate minds, actionable strategies to help you grow your portfolio and build wealth faster. Again, go to www.truthaboutrealestateinvesting.ca and download your free guide today. Now, please enjoy the show. Hi, Tony. What's keeping you busy these days?
Well, that's quite a question. I mean, I think like many people, I'm watching what's happening in Ottawa with great interest. I mean, we say that I say that a bit in jest, but of course there are serious issues that we're all concerned about. I think with respect to the incoming administration, President Trump's second term, what all is going on there, and some of the conversations happening, and not to mention, of course, the announcement from Prime Minister Trudeau this past week of his impending departure as Liberal leader and Prime Minister. So, for someone who works in the area of politics and government relations, lots to be looking at and lots to be concerned about in terms of future direction of the country. Premier Ford, of course, is taking a very active role in what's happening with respect to some of the comments being made by President-elect Trump. So, no shortage of things to be concerned about and focusing on right now. It's definitely interesting times, and I think, as I've said to folks, like buckle up. The next 6 or 9 months, I think, will be really fascinating.
I couldn't agree more. My wife and I are real estate investors. My wife's has an accounting firm as well, so we were really disappointed with the last budget announcement by the federal government when they are announcing the changes to the capital gains, the inclusion rate and whatnot.
Yep. Yep.
My father is also a doctor, so an Ontario doctor. So doctors across Canada were quite upset with the capital gains rates, inclusion rates.
They were very vocal. in their sort of view on that. I think the one thing to watch on that, and maybe cause for hope, is that while it is true that CRA is sort of implementing the increase in the inclusion rate and collecting that, despite the fact there's no legislative approval to do so. I think that based on the political environment, we know we're going to have an election probably April or May. It seems most likely to me that legislation will never pass, and so I think there will be better news to come on that. I don't see either, and I think it'll be challenged in the courts. So either the courts are going to deal with this, or if not, I think the incoming administration of Pierre Poilievre, I can't speak for them, obviously, but I think there is certainly a reason to be hopeful that this is not going to go forward. So for folks who are just upset about that, I think hold on for a bit, and I think there'll be better news on that hopefully in the next 6 months or so.
I cannot wait personally. Now, for our listeners who aren't familiar with who you are, can you tell us a bit about yourself and the multiple hats that you wear?
Sure. So my name is Tony Irwin, and I'm the president and CEO of the Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario. That's a mouthful, FRPO for short. And FRPO is the largest association representing companies who own, build, manage, supply, and service purpose-built rental housing. So that's the one hat. And then the second hat that you alluded to is I'm also the interim president of the Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations, and its mandate is the same, or does essentially the same thing that FERPO does, but at the national level.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's differentiation. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you just had a lot of free time. That's why you're doing
I don't have much free time, but you know what?
anymore.
I've been running FERPO for a little over 6 years. I've been doing running the federal association on an interim basis for about 18 months. I'm looking for that to certainly have been sort of I guess, leading a sort of restructuring of that federal association. And so it's my hope that will become the interim title will be removed, and I'll go forward and I can, talk about that a little bit. But we have a great team, and we're able to share a lot of services between the two groups. And we're industry associations, so our funding comes from our members. We have to be very nimble, and we have to be very prudent managers of the money that our members entrust in us to do the work we do. So I think there are a lot of great benefits to both the Ontario and the federal associations kind of running under one management team. And so that's the work I've been doing, and have been very pleased with the great support I've received from a lot of our industry members, and continuing to get that as more become aware of who we are and what we're doing. So it is a lot of work. There's not a lot of free time, but I love what I do, and I think it's so important right now that our industry have strong representation everywhere, but certainly federally, and at Queen's Park and in Toronto. I think it's really important. We know that housing is top of mind for every Canadian, every level of government. So I think the work we're doing is absolutely critical in that regard, and I'm happy to be leading the effort and working with great people.
And both of your organizations are the largest in each jurisdiction, respectively.
Well, certainly in Ontario, we are absolutely the largest. There are some other associations that exist. We work with many other, the way the rental housing industry sort of evolved, certainly in Ontario, there are a number of municipal or regional associations,
Hmm.
and we work with many of them: Toronto, Hamilton, London, Eastern Ontario. There's a long list of others, but many of those have existed for some time. FERPO is 40 years old this year. We're celebrating a birthday. And at the provincial level, there is no other association that is. We are the largest by far. There are some others, but FERPO is we've got 350,000, 2,200 members. who collectively represent around 350,000 doors in Ontario. So that's, there is no one else that comes close to that. On the federal side, there are other associations who, just because, as you know, our industry is diverse. We have members who wear a lot of hats themselves in terms of what they do, commercial, different kinds of residential housing they might build. The work they do with us, it pertains to their rental portfolio, but they might build single family homes and townhouses, and they might do other things. So there are other industry associations they would also engage with in terms of other things that they do as businesses. And some of those groups, are involved advocating for rental housing, both provincially or federally. But certainly, I would say that we are the leading voice that represents, for which our sole mission federally is to represent purpose-built rental housing. We engage with groups like RealPAC, Canadian Home Builders, many other great groups who are excellent advocates and understand the importance of working with government on behalf of their members. But CFAA, which is the federal group, we are the largest group for which our primary mission and focus is advocating for purpose-built rental housing, period.
Very interesting. And you've had a very long career. You've even worked
That just means
between.
that's a polite way of saying I'm old. So thank you for that. That's very nice. Thank
I
you.
actually don't think we're that far apart in age. I'm on your LinkedIn, so you're very public about it. Well, you worked in
For
Queens
sure.
Park in 2002.
I did. I did. I also worked there in 1997, but yeah, absolutely. I have done a few things over my career for sure. And, I studied political science in university. And first job I got at age 23 was working at Queen's Park during the first term of the Mike Harris government. So I thought it was pretty cool, frankly, that I actually got a job in the area in which I studied. A lot of my classmates, ended up doing something else, right? Very few ended up actually working in politics. So I was pretty, I thought that was pretty cool. Did that for a while. Left there because I was, I think, wanting to see what else was out there. Going through that, I think what a lot of people do with liberal arts degrees, you don't necessarily have a clear line of sight to what you want to do for a
Mhm.
career. So I did some other things, but ultimately, the pull of public policy and politics brought me back to Queen's Park. And so I had a second tour, which is not unusual. A lot of people will go work at Queen's Park or work as political staff more than once. They'll have more than one go around at it. And I certainly did. I worked for a premier when we did the opposition after we were after we lost government. And so that was a great experience. I learned a lot and saw a lot. We had during the time I worked for the Premier of Ontario, and that was Ernie Eves, we had a number. We had the blackout, which some people might recall. We had SARS, which, of course, at the time was a super big deal. After the pandemic we've now all gone through, it's certainly was nothing like that. But at the time, SARS was a big deal. We had the Pope was here, the Queen was here. We had a lot of big things that happened. West Nile,
G20.
Mancow.
Yeah,
Well, no, that was after, but
sure.
we had a lot of significant events that took place within a short period of time. So being having a front row seat to that, as someone again who studied this and who likes watching things like West Wing and those kinds of shows, to me that was a great experience. So I really learned a lot, and that's propelled me into the work I've been doing since
Right.
leaving Queens Park ever since.
Right. So you've already done hard stuff. What we Ontario landlords face is nothing compared to what you what you've seen.
I wouldn't
I'm
say that.
joking.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, in my time doing this work now, the calls I have with members about what they experience, on a daily basis. I mean, there's some pretty horrific
Mhm,
stories that I hear. So, conditions that their units get left in, the way
mhm,
they get treated. I mean, again, there are all kinds of things that happen and on both sides of the ledger, if you will. But I think that we hold ourselves out to a pretty high standard. Our members, they really strive to provide the best housing they can, to treat their residents respectfully, and to work with them. They are their customers. And so I think that's really how we engage and how we
mhm,
conduct ourselves.
mhm.
And for the most part, I think their residents do the same. But, I do hear I don't. Almost a week doesn't go by without hearing from someone, a member, or whether they're one of our members or a member of a regional or municipal association, and I talk to them at an event or somewhere that I am, and I hear about just the gut wrenching story of how they haven't been paid rent for 6, 9, 12 months. They're not able to. It's caused the other sort of the knock on effect of other things that have happened because they're not able to get their rent paid, or when they finally get someone evicted. And again, no one really wants to do that, but we know that sometimes there is no other recourse but to do that. When they get their unit back and they're just devastated by what they have found. I mean, this is a really tough business, and I have learned, and I travel and I speak to landlord groups around the province and now around the country. And the stories I hear from people who are just trying to, they've worked hard in their lives. They've maybe come up with a down payment to buy a property to rent out, which we need desperately for people to do, and we need to support people who do that because of the housing crisis we're in. And most Canadians don't have defined benefit pensions, don't know that government's not going to be there for them. We have a pension plan, but obviously it's not nearly enough to help retire. So people are taking responsibility for themselves, buying a property, renting it out, and they're saying like this is it's really they don't feel like they're supported. They feel like we're often vilified wrongly. And again, it's not that any one group is perfect. There are always outliers, but that's generally speaking, that's how many people feel. And they say like, look, we've done all this, and we feel like we're it's really hard for us to be able to do this, and it just seems like the hits keep on coming against us as an industry. You talk about capital gains. I heard from a lot of small landlords who called me and said, like, really? After everything that's happened to us and everything we've endured over the last number of years, government's now going to do this too? A lot of people are throwing their hands up and saying, like, I can't do this anymore. It just doesn't make sense economically or from mental health perspective and otherwise. Just isn't. So I do have huge. I'm not a landlord myself. I've been a tenant on numerous occasions in my life, and I have tremendous respect for people who decide to get into this business and who try to make a go of it. And I see, firsthand the stories of how difficult it is. And we do our best to, as I said, advocate for our members, to advocate for government, for governments to, who, as we know, we're so heavily regulated, to, bring forward rules and legislation and regulations that, will actually support the industry, as opposed to make a lot of our members feel like they're like we're the bad guy, which obviously we're not. So it's been a real learning for me over these last 6 years to see firsthand what a lot of people go through every day. And it's I know it's very hard.
So this podcast I've been doing since 2016. So I've done over 300 interviews, all an hour
Yeah,
long, with almost all as distinguished guests like yourself. I personally know about 500 landlords in Ontario.
right,
I have well over 350 clients.
right.
And then there's a piece that I don't think gets discussed enough, is that once the property is under lease under for a long-term tenancy, it's
Yeah,
as if we've lost our property rights should the tenant cause any damage to it. I don't understand. And then even there's quite a few stories where tenants have assaulted landlords,
yeah,
and and again, because you're a landlord and because the perpetrator is the tenant, is as if we've lost our human rights. Uh, that's just anecdotally what I'm seeing regularly. I just not seeing enough justice for our landlords. I'm not asking you to comment on it. Again, this is anecdotal,
yeah,
but to your point, this is not a favorable situation as well at all. Like I've owned over 40 properties. We're actually in the middle. We've actually sold over half, just sorry, almost half of our Ontario long-term rental portfolio in
yeah,
Ontario, with
yeah.
plans to sell the rest once we have what we expect to be the capital gains. Um, uh, how if it doesn't get passed, we're probably
Right.
selling the rest. And I'm not the only one. I'm hearing this
No.
consistently,
Yeah.
especially in Ontario. Like you work across the country. I speak
Yeah.
to Albertans and Americans all the time who say we're nuts. And then the gut
You're right.
reaction from the Americans is that they'll say, Ontario is worse than California in terms of how tenants run things, right? So that was an ultimate gut punch. Again,
Yeah,
from
it's
anecdotally,
yeah, no, absolutely, and I get the same thing. I mean, when I travel, and yeah, people look at Ontario, and they say, I don't know why you would even do it. I don't know why
Mhm,
you would even why you would even get into this business in this province. It's so. I guess my response to that would be, I hear similar stories,
mhm,
and it's not okay. It's not. We need to. I think we really need to take a hard look at what is going on, and why so many people like yourselves who have been in this business for a number of years are
mhm,
getting out. And you, as I say to policymakers, capital is mobile. It'll go where it can go wherever you want it to go. So you're taking your capital and doing something else with it,
mhm,
whether you're taking it here or going somewhere else. And that's not positive, obviously, for Ontario or for Canada to have that happening. So I do think there has to be more discussion around that. We know that the number of, when you look at the rental housing universe, obviously a significant percentage of that, are 3 units or less. That market, and it's I'm I always say to people, I don't think it's helpful for us as an industry. We need, yes, there are different sizes of rental housing providers, and yes, different models, different shapes and sizes, different challenges, perhaps because of that. But it is really important that we have a unified voice, and I know sometimes that can be difficult, depending on the topic and sort of who's having the conversations. But
mhm,
it doesn't benefit us if there's any sort of division between us as a group,
mhm,
recognizing that large, recognizing the different dynamics at play amongst different investors, different people that are in the space. So
mhm,
I would say that, and I would say, but I do think in terms of what you're anecdotally hearing, and I'm hearing it too, I agree that I don't think enough attention is given to that topic. I don't think
mhm,
enough time is devoted in places where it should be about that, and really saying, so are we happy with this? Because if we're not, which I'm not, and we shouldn't be, then what do we need to be doing as government, as society, to turn this around? Because
mhm,
this doesn't seem like a place that we should want to be in. And to your point, when other jurisdictions look at us and kind of throw their hands up and say, I don't understand how it could have gotten to this place. I think we
mhm,
really need to sort of have some real serious discussions about that and what we can do to make it better. And it'll be too late for some. Some will say, I don't care, I'm out and I'm not interested in coming back in. But this is not a short-term issue. So I do think we need to, as a country, and then break it down into the relevant sort of regions and areas, say what can we do to make it better? Because it's not,
mhm.
what you're telling me is not isolated, and it's not okay. And we should, as a country, want better. We should be demanding better of our policymakers and those who make these decisions. And that's the work we do. And I'm not, so we are doing that, but I mean, we need to continue, I think, to be engaging in those conversations.
So a generic question from AI.
Yeah.
What's your current assessment of the Ontario rental housing market? Are there any trends that investors should be paying close attention to?
Well, I mean, we know that last year there was some, there was some softening of rents. And I think we know why. I mean, the federal government obviously has made some changes to immigration targets, to non-permanent residents numbers, to international students, and so not surprising to me then that there would be a corresponding sort of output on that, or there would be an impact from those reductions starting to be put in place in terms of demand for housing. We still need a lot more housing than we have, but it just means that, and it's not, it's just obviously the point though is that if there are less people coming in to the country, obviously it is relieving some of the pressure. Now, that's also because we had a lot of housing rental units come online this year or in 2024, which is because there were a lot of projects that, of course, had been approved 3, 4, and 5 years ago that were completed, and those units then came online. So the combination of those two sort of things, or those two sides of this, did result in a softening of some rents. What do we think? What are we seeing, or what do we think is going to happen going forward in 2025 and 2026? what I hear consistently from people I talk to in our membership is the pipeline going forward is going to dry up for some time. Again, the units that came online last year weren't started last year. Obviously, they were started some years before that. So, in terms of what's coming behind them, very little. Because the economics to build rental housing simply aren't working. And people say, what about all these things government's done for you? And I say, well, let's look at those things the government has done for us. And we're certainly appreciative of of some things that have been done. The GST exemption certainly is helpful. Interest rates coming down, of course, not a direct government policy, but interest rates are starting to come down. But again, as you can't make the announcement on Wednesday and expect to see results from that on Thursday or even the next month, or even, it takes time for things like that to kind of percolate through uh, and to actually, demonstrate results in terms of, positive impact. So these are good things. But to your point, then on the other hand, you get, or you get the capital gains announcement. And you say, wait a minute, this is like, we'll get one thing, something on one hand that's good, but then something else happens that seems to negate the good. So are we really any further ahead? So, I think what I hear from members is the numbers don't work. It's true that there are some, of course, we know the condo market has totally imploded, and that's not expected to change, for the foreseeable future. There are a lot of units sitting either for rent or for sale, in places like downtown Toronto that are not moving, and so there will certainly be impacts there. We know that even several years ago, a lot of condo investors were a little underwater, but they were okay with it because of the gains they were going to appreciate on the unit, the value increasing on the unit itself. They were okay to be a bit cash flow negative, knowing that their unit was appreciating in value, and they would be okay with that. Obviously, that's not the case so much now. So there are a lot of concerning elements that I think mean that the next year or two are going to be tough. We know there are some condo developers who are looking to transition their condo projects to rental, which, again, not that long ago, you'd see it be the other way around, where, PBRs would become condo because that's the only thing that would work. So that's a bit of turning things around a bit, but I think it's going to be, there will be some tough times ahead before things start to improve again. So before we can start to see more supply coming back online and really start to move. But I think, and you hear, home construction is essentially cratered. Like, there are a lot of things that are not great right now,
Mhm.
and we'll just have to see. That's why we are very I think focused on change of government in Ottawa, working with if the Conservatives come into office, then trying to work with them. The Liberals have done some positive things, but again, they're in their own. They've got other things they're concerned with right now. So I think just recognizing the reality that I think we all see, which is the federal government is going to change. So certainly engaging with them, and provincially, we expect there to be an election this year as well. Though we'll see on that, but that's been, there's been quite a lot of speculation that Premier Ford will call an election, and we're obviously following that, and looking forward to continuing to engage with the Ontario government on, and again, obviously other provinces. You have listeners in other provinces, so as in running the federal association, we are interested in other jurisdictions too, but really want to see how we can continue to move, have conversations, and bring forward more positive change. But I think right now, the news, the immediate outlook isn't great, but I'm hoping that we're going to see better days, afterwards.
You cover two jurisdictions, so I'll let you answer this how you'd like to. What are the
Sure.
top three things that you're advocating for?
Well, that's a really great question. I mean, I think I'll talk about Ontario first, and I think what are we advocating for there? I mean, we continue to. I think one of the things that you're hearing about now in Ontario quite a lot are development charges. The whole conversation around DCs, and so you know when I talk to people, I tell them when they say, "Well, what are the biggest challenges to getting rental housing built?" And simplify it to the greatest extent possible, it's time and money, right? So the money side, as we continue to see development charges grow and grow and grow. I mean, some of the percentages, we're talking like, hundreds of percentages, maybe over 1,000% in some places like Toronto and Mississauga over, the last maybe 5 or 6 years. Like just huge increases in development charges. And, that's put a real a lot of pressure obviously on performers on being able to get shovels in the ground. If you don't own land already, and even if you do, but for certain if you don't, there's virtually no hope. Even if you do on the land already, it can still be extremely challenging from a cost perspective. So we really have to, at both levels of government, continue to look at what we can do to bring the cost down to build personal rental housing. And so whether that's advocating for some kind of a holiday on DCs, or I think we know that the model to the DC model, the growth pays for growth model doesn't work anymore. And it may have worked in the past, again, when, circumstances were different, we weren't growing to the extent that we are now. It was a different time, but now, the infrastructure required, is tremendous. The cost for that is enormous. How do we fund it? It no longer works to fund it on the backs of future development. So how do we fund these costs that are necessary? So there really needs to be a big conversation, I think, and it's not there aren't any, but we need to continue to talk about that. Our friends at AMO, that's the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, our municipal colleagues who work in municipal governments and the province, and the sector, to say, how can we do this differently? Because the rapid increase in government fees and charges is a huge obstacle to getting housing built. And if we acknowledge and agree that we are in a housing crisis and we need more housing to be built, and rental housing has got to be a big part of the conversation, and we can't build it because of the costs, then we've got to do something differently. We have to acknowledge that if we want things to be different, we have to do things differently. And so, development charges, some sort of like development charge reform, I think is really important to talk about. And so, but when I talk about the sort of cost basket, so development charges, whether we need to look at some sort of property tax deferral, or property tax abatements for some time. Like, I think everyone thinks that they're the most special, and everyone thinks they should get sort of some sort of special deal or what have you, or treatment. But we and that can be complicated because other sectors would say, what about us? And right now, my focus is really only on rental housing, because that's what I do. So not to sort of suggest that there aren't issues for single family homes or towns or any other form of housing, but I'm focusing only on rental housing. And so what can we do? And perhaps in times of crisis and times of extraordinary circumstances, sometimes extraordinary measures are needed, and they might be time limited. And we've seen that with things like GST, for example, and maybe that's the way to go. But I think when it comes to things like development charges, that reform, that we need something there that's not just temporary. Like, that's, I think, a system, or a formula that no longer works. And sure, we could fix it on an interim basis, but I think it's going to require a longer term permanent fix, or else we're never going to really be able to move forward. So I would say, we're really focusing on the cost side. What can we do to make that better, so that projects do pencil and we can actually get shovels in the ground? And government fees and charges, while some, having things like GST and PST exemption is great, and that will certainly help, we are saying that's not enough, and we need other supports. And I think the fact that development charges are getting so much attention these days is because it's like a runaway train that no one knows how to stop. And we've got to really, I think, tackle that head on and say, something needs to be done here.
Yeah, I have friends that, for example, who are doing like what the government wants, like the missing middle, like
Mhm.
doing garden suites, or trying to like take one property, turn it into four properties. We do a
Yeah,
lot of business in Hamilton, for example, and the development
right.
charge to go from triplex to fourplex is $70,000. And or my friend in Kitchener who's trying to build a garden suite, his development charges are between $50,000 $60,000 for just a garden suite. Like, this doesn't sound like the government's on board with us really to create more housing.
No, and that's a great point, right? When you talk about when you provide examples like that, and I think you say that to a lot of people who will listen to you say that and say that seems that seems kind of nuts.
Yeah,
So
they're
I
not going
think
to
it
do
really, right, like it doesn't work. It's not gonna, you're not gonna do it exactly. So I think we really need to talk about, in a very kind of I think a very grown up sort of honest way, like what are the challenges and how can we overcome them. But I think the other thing too is, like, so we're talking about government fees and charges. We want to look at all the costs involved in development. We know cost of land is extremely prohibitive for, unless you already own it. Government fees and charges are a big part. Construction costs, which we saw skyrocket during the
Mhm.
pandemic. Then there was some kind of leveling off, but I think the reality is I expect they will continue to go up. We still have a skilled trade shortage, and that's going to continue as we see more retirements in some of those skilled trades. Workers who are retiring, the bricklayers and the stonemasons and some of those trades will be retiring, and we're not seeing people come up the ranks sort of in those areas. So that will continue to be, I think, an issue. Uh, we're also talking about, and we have been for a long time, that we do density is not a bad word. We do need to talk about, and it's not that it's not happening anywhere, but clearly there needs to be even more discussions around that, around supporting greater density. We have seen zoning changes in a lot of places, and that's certainly been good, but we do need more density. And so I think, as part of all of these conversations that we're having, we know that there still is a stigma attached to rental housing and to building rental housing and just rental housing in general. And that's something that I think we need to continue to talk about. That rental housing is not housing of last resort. It is, very much accepted in many other parts of the world. And I think we have to be more accepting of it here. But I know we hear stories, all the time of where applications are made, and the community groups, the local groups, the resident groups, the ratepayer groups are there opposing it because they think it brings property values down, it
Mhm.
brings in an unseedy element of people, all these things that they think they don't want. And if we are really wanting to be the kind of country that I think we want to be, and people talk about Toronto being a global city and all these things, we'll leave aside congestion and infrastructure because that's a whole nother conversation. But if we want to be that kind of city, we have to embrace greater density. And yes, we need the infrastructure to support it. We need the transportation to support it. We need services and other things to support that. But we also have to have an environment where people are supportive,
Mhm.
voters and communities, just society at large understands and is supportive of this conceptually. And I think there are still many people who are not. And elected officials do listen to their constituents as they should. We need that conversation to change so that the elected officials will come forward and feel more confident in making those decisions because they feel like their constituents are actually in favor and supportive.
I was actually in Hong Kong and Singapore just last year, true world-class cities, and I just did a quick chat GPT. Hong Kong government housing is usually between 30 to 40 stories, and Singapore between 30 and 50 stories.
Right.
When you mean density. And the rents in those units are between $300 to $400 a month. In Hong Kong, at about $400 or $500 a month for an apartment in
Yeah.
Singapore. So when we
Yeah.
talk about like truly socialist societies, like
Right.
that's there's millions of people living in subsidized housing in both of those cities, truly world class cities. And then I actually don't even know. Do we actually have any government housing coming online in Canada, Ontario?
Well, I mean, so certainly in Toronto, for example, Mayor Chow is talking about she is trying to advance and some units. And in fact, she made an announcement before Christmas where it's a certain number of units that will receive. reduction in property taxes. They have to have a certain percentage of units that are affordable as defined by the city. So, there is, but they are not, the city will not be building those units. They
So
are going to partner with developers because they don't have the capacity. They don't have frankly, it is our view that, well, we know that the private sector builds like 90% of all housing or something in Canada. It's quite, the vast majority of all housing in Canada. So they will be partnering with developers to build those units. And I think that's what they should be doing. We know that, Toronto Community Housing is not, you would not be putting them out as an example of the kind of housing that we want. I don't think so. But you raise another very important issue, which is the whole issue around affordable housing. And I'm often asked, what are my members doing to sort of support that or to build that? And I was thought it was interesting. I was at a CMHC held a housing conference in Ottawa, the first one they'd held in person since the pandemic back in the spring, and the federal last year, and the federal housing minister was there, and he made a comment from the stage in front of all the attendees that market market builders and providers of housing don't provide below market housing, right? Like we are market providers. And so I thought it was an interesting comment because the reality is we do, yes, we provide market housing. And so obviously at market rents within a lot of our projects are requirements to provide certain percentage of affordable units, which might be in exchange for city funding, or there's obviously some sort of agreement. And so in exchange for some sort of support, there's a requirement that the developer provide affordable units, which is good. And I think that's as we should be. But we know that a lot of people are struggling with affordability. And so what do we do about that? And I think the answer is we do need a range of housing or a range of housing supports. So, you know, my members can't provide housing, obviously significant housing at below market rents unless there are offsets to do that. So, but we know that a lot of people can't afford market rents. So what do we do about that? And so I think that's where you need to either have partnerships where you can have governments working with developers, working with other whether it be nonprofits or other community agencies in projects, which we do see examples of. So where federal government might provide land, province might provide or city might provide property tax abatements. Developer will provide a certain number of affordable units. Like that's how we can build projects where within one building you can have rents at different levels that work for different kinds of people. But we also have to, I think, recognize that as a society, it is government's role to help those who really are not able to house themselves or pay rents themselves. So government does have a role to play here, and I think government acknowledges that because I think in a country as rich as Canada, everyone should be housed. We should be able to house everyone. And right now we're not. And that is becoming a growing problem. Homelessness, encampments is becoming a greater problem. But I think we do have to, this idea that it is the, sort of private sector market providers of rental housing, that it's our responsibility to provide, house everyone or provide housing at rents that anyone can afford. That simply doesn't work, right? We have investors who we have to, returns that we have to provide. We can't get construction financing if the pro forma doesn't demonstrate a certain rate of return. All the things that you know better than I do. So, being as that's the case, then how do we ensure that we can house those who are in different precarious financial situations? And government has a role to play there. And an industry can be involved, and we should be, but it's not singularly our responsibility because as market providers of housing, we simply cannot do that for everyone in society. So we all have to work together and figure out who plays what role in trying to ensure that we can house all Canadians to the greatest extent possible.
Hong Kong has about 2 million people, residents living in government subsidized housing. And then
Right.
per Wikipedia, I checked it a while ago, crime rate is actually lower in government housing than in the private
Interesting.
sector. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm sure it's
For
around,
sure.
so probably around controls. If it's probably pretty strict. If you
Right,
break
right,
the law, you can't live here.
right.
Yeah,
Right,
sounds fair.
right. Well, and that's an interesting point. You know, we have also seen coming out of the pandemic a sharp increase in violent behavior in our buildings. So whether it be tenant on tenant violence, tenant on building staff, and I think a lot of reasons for that. I'm sure we know coming out of the pandemic that a lot of people are still struggling in various ways, and we know that living in apartment towers is can be a bit of a pressure cooker at the best of times. Add to that financial precariousness, mental health, and addiction, which has obviously become, I think, a greater issue. That, of course, can lead to, I think, I think is contributing to some of what we are seeing.
Mhm.
And as I say, it's something that we're talking about more because I'm hearing from members more who are saying we're seeing things that we haven't normally in the past seen in terms of violent behavior and staff who are feeling uncomfortable coming to work because
Mhm.
of what they're experiencing. So that's kind of a I think broader sort of societal issue, but it's definitely playing itself out, not just in apartment buildings. I hear it from colleagues who work in other industries, other sectors, that they're seeing it too, and I think just speaks to some of the just the aftermath or of the pandemic, or just what many in society are experiencing now, and we're seeing it play out in different ways, and certainly in apartment buildings, we're seeing it more so than we have in the past.
Inflation doesn't help. It's affecting everyone quite significantly.
For sure. When you're not sure how you're going to pay your bills, you're not sure. There's all these things. I mean, a lot of people are really having there are a lot of real struggles, and so yes, that can sort of that can play itself out in all kinds of ways, and people have shorter fuses, and we're not maybe as kind. Right? People are just life is hard for a lot of people, and so I think that's certainly we're seeing that.
Two hot topics I always see come up, mostly landlord tenant board and of course
Mhm.
rent control. I'll let you decide which would you like to talk about.
Well, I mean, I would say so on the matter of the landlord tenant board. So, we all know that it is, it certainly is not working as it should be. I would say, and I know this from surveying our members and in discussions with the Ministry of the Attorney General, it is getting better. I know it's no comfort to people who are living it every day and who are, in a very protracted and stressful process, as I'm sure many people listening to this are. But in terms of the data and what we're seeing, it is getting better in terms of the time it takes to get through the process. But admittedly, where it started from and where we wanted to get to is such a big gap, right? I mean, when it was, it was obviously at a place where, it's over a year. I mean, that's so there's a long way to go from that to where we want it to be. Yes, it's improving, but there's a long way still. There's a lot of improvement still needed. I think everyone deserves timely access to justice. Everyone deserves a system where they can have their disputes adjudicated in a timely way. And I say that for landlords and tenants, and we know that it's not where it needs to be. So we spend a lot of time, and frankly, over the last, I would say, 8 or 9 months, we have really focused quite a bit on speaking with the Ontario government. On this issue and on trying to bring further, more improvements to the landlord tenant board. It needs to be, I think in terms of what we're seeing, the biggest improvement right now, or in sort of over the last little while, has been time from application to hearing. But that was the area that was the worst in terms of the how long it was taking. So that's
What's
really
the average
seemed.
now?
So I think if I recall correctly, now we're talking the average now from application to hearing is, I want to say it's around like 3.5 months or so, 3.5 to 4 months, something like that. Because the overall, so that's the first part, and then the hearing to ruling, and then of course there, ruling to enforcement, all that together, the total I think we're seeing now is around 7.5 months, 7.5 months, something like that. And so, as I say, the application to hearing is the biggest chunk of time, and then the others are some version of a month and a half or a month or something each. So when you add it all up, it gets you to around sort of the 7 month or 7 month and change
Right.
mark. And maybe a year ago, it was like 12 months or,
Oh boy, and this is just
right.
average. This doesn't include like
That's
the
just average.
vesting
That's just so
clause.
so somebody watching this right now saying, "What are you talking about? I just it took me a year and a half." Yeah, that's just the average. Doesn't mean that there aren't worse cases that take longer. I know there are. That's kind of average data, and so that's not at all where it should be. It needs to be a whole lot better than that. That time overall time needs to be cut in half for sure. It
Mhm.
needs to be cut in half and then some. Right. So I think 90 days is probably a time frame that we should be striving for from sort of start to finish. And
Right.
obviously, based on what I just said to you, we're not there at this point. So we continue to advocate to government for more things that can be done. And it's admittedly I mean, if it were easy, it would be done. Right. So, but it's not. We do have a lot of great conversations. Like, government is definitely listening, and it's the Attorney General, who we have a lot of great conversations with, is certainly watches this very closely and has been working hard to try to
Mhm.
speed up the process. Hired a lot more adjudicators. More hearings are taking place. Uh, the one thing that's important to note, though, is that 2024 saw the most applications, I think, in the history of the board. Applications were up quite a lot this year, and so that, of course, isn't great in terms of trying to reduce the backlog. It is what it is. So, we just continue to, push ahead, advocating. We've long advocated for, default orders with respect to applications for non-payment of rent. It's something we've not been able to achieve yet, but we continue to talk about it. We have seen some reforms just at the end of this year that were passed. One was with respect to hearings. Now that they're virtual, what you would see is that you'd see a hearing would take place, and then the adjudicator's term would end, or they would resign, or something would happen, and in that case, would get brought back, have to go back to the very beginning. So now, because they're, again, they're on tape and they're recorded, now the government has made a rule change to say that in those such situations, another adjudicator can watch the hearing and can carry on from that point, as opposed to it having to be put back to the beginning. And to me, we know that that would often cause, if you can imagine, if you've gone through a hearing and then it has to go back to the beginning, that's going to slow things down quite a bit. So being able to say this has happened, but we can assign it to another adjudicator and they can just watch the hearing and then they can issue a ruling, that's certainly better, preferable than having to start over. So that's one change. The government's also looking at the possibility, I think, of having utilizing uh, uh, credit bureaus. And so then there's been a lot of talk about this having a place where landlords can look to see about previous rulings or previous arrears, and so the government's looking at the possibility of potentially doing that. Again, it's early stages, I think, of where that might go. But our view, of course, is that we uh, I would imagine we all want a good credit score, and we of course all want people to pay their rent and honor their obligations. So if this is a way to inform landlords of what's happening
Mhm.
with something, and if it encourages tenants to want to pay their rent because they don't want an impact on their credit report, then I think that's positive. So we'll see where that goes, but that's something that the government is looking at, maybe trying to do. So we just continue to kind of engage with government on these conversations. What else can we do what other things can government do to, bring greater efficiencies? Yes, education is important. Yes, there might be a need for more staff, more adjudicators, but what other rule changes, process changes can government make that would, speed up the process? And there are other, so there's more, always work to do there, and we continue to engage with government, but I hear all the time from members who are, again, extremely frustrated with what they're experiencing. It's not okay. There's no justification for a system that takes this long. So we need to just continue to work collectively as an industry to say to government, here are things you could consider doing that would. So we're also advocating for private bailiffs. That's another suggestion, because a lot of in certain, that's an issue. Getting a sheriff out to enforce an order can take quite a long time. So it's a
Mhm.
look.
I'm Irwin's just telling me 12 weeks was his experience
Right.
out in Durham
Right.
region.
So allow us to utilize private bailiffs. Like these are it's suggestions that I think make a lot of sense. It's getting government to, to make some of these changes. And sometimes, it can take longer than you might think. But it's the wheels of government don't always move as quickly as you'd want. But this is a long game. We're in this for the long haul, and so we just continue to chip away at it and hope that we can continue improvements that will result in better experiences at the board.
For my listeners' benefit, in the markets that we target in the States that are landlord friendly, we have enforcement within 30 to 60 days.
Yeah, right.
And it's
Yeah,
enforced by law enforcement.
right,
There is no other
right.
third
There's
party.
no other right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If it's a
and
sheriff, it is the sheriff
right,
department.
right. No, I understand. I understand. And so that's, yeah, I mean, and again, they can get, some of those same jurisdictions can probably get development applications approved in 6 months.
Oh, like
For
nothing,
example,
yeah. And then they
right.
have,
So,
like the city of Austin, for example, the rents are down
yes,
10% year over year because
yeah,
they built so much, which is to
right.
the benefit of society. Private investment pays for it.
They've actually overbuilt in Austin.
Exactly.
So,
That's why rents are down
right,
10% year over year.
right,
And that's
right,
to the benefit of the
100%.
renter.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, and that's what I'm saying about what we're seeing now in terms of data that's now come out from last year, where we've seen sort of rents soften a bit, and I'm saying this is exactly what supply and demand does, right? The reason why rents have softened a bit in Toronto and sort of some of the GTA is because we did get more supply online and demand was down. Guess what happens when that happens, right? I mean, this is not, but we have a lot of people, or there are certainly people who will question with me whether that actually happens or not. And I'm saying, well, here's Exhibit A that it did actually happen here last year because of the combination of more units coming online and less people looking for them. Rent softened a bit. I'm
Mhm,
not an economist, but that's
mhm,
just demonstrates that when markets are allowed to function,
mhm,
that's what they do. And so you ask for rent control, and obviously it's something that we've lived with in Ontario since the 1970s. We continue, we have a system that I think has, for many years allowed us to be able to operate, relatively well, not perfectly, but relatively well, with having vacancy decontrol, allowing to reset rents to market a turnover, with having AGIs for those who apply for them to try to offset some of the significant infrastructure capital costs they put into, major infrastructure projects,
mhm,
having those things. The problem, obviously, over the last few years for sure has been the cap, the rent guideline cap at 2.5%. And so that's something that, of course, came into law in Ontario, I think, in 2017. The previous Liberal government brought that in when they also did things like, kill the post 91 exemption. So essentially, rent controlled everything. They also brought in the cap. And at the time when they did that, the cap was not an issue. Inflation wasn't because the rent guideline is set, it's a CPI calculation. And so a cap was brought in just to, sort of, I guess, but at the time, inflation wasn't at 2.5%, so it wasn't a thing. But I think obviously when I arrived here 6 years ago, I said, well, I'm not an economist, but I'm pretty sure at some point inflation is going to exceed this. So we should try to deal with that.
You
We're not
you
successful.
jinxed us. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we were not successful at getting it overturned, as you obviously know. But now, this year, 2025, is the third consecutive year when the rent guideline's been at 2.5%. And if we'd had a CPI calculation over those same 3 years, it would be more than double that combined, 7.5% over 3 years. The CPI calculation would be double that. But we've only been able to raise rents by the 2.5% each of those years. We know our costs have gone up far greater than that, whether it be insurance, property taxes, utilities, interest rates. All these things have driven our costs up far more than that. But obviously, the cap has limited how much we've been able to increase rents by. And of
Mhm,
course, vacancy turnover is also down significantly in most markets. So you're not able to then reset rents to the extent that you were before because people aren't leaving because there's not places for a lot of people to go. And so, that's all these things work together and they're all kind of interrelated. And so, my sort of and of course, during the pandemic, we know we had the rent freeze, and we know that in the first year a lot of landlords didn't raise rents for obvious reasons, and government froze rent. Right, so it's been a tough go on that front. Yes, a lot of Canadians and Ontarians are struggling financially, and are having challenges, but so are landlords. Right, and these are businesses, and they have, as we know in any other business, if their costs go up, then the end user of that product will pay more. But in our case, that we're limited by how much we can, increase rents by, it's put a real significant pressure on a lot of our members to be able to operate. And so, I would like to see the rent guideline in Ontario go back to a CPI calculation. I think that's fair and reasonable. I think CPI is what's used in a lot of circumstances as a barometer of kind of what is happening, relative to cost. And so I think that's fair. I think it was fair before, and I would like to see it go back to that going forward. But that's something that is, we've not been successful at being able to get that changed. So and I think now as inflation is starting to come down, politically, it will continue to be a challenge for us maybe to get government to move on that, right? I recognize that the cap has been very challenging for a lot of rental housing operators who say my costs are going up by 3 times that. How come I'm not allowed to raise rent to the similar, in a similar manner? And that is the cap. So that's a tough one. And while people say to me, well, we shouldn't be advocating for the elimination of rent control, in Ontario, that's simply not politically on the table. It's not. There's no political party that's going to say that they advocate for eliminating rent control. It's about what can we do to advocate for the best rent control system or the best rent control regime that we could get. And I'd say Premier Ford, we are very appreciative that Premier Ford brought back the rent control exemption for new construction for new units in November of 2018. That's definitely positive. So we're very grateful for that. But I think the cap is something that we'd really like to see some movement on. But again, I think it's definitely a challenge. It's something we're going to have to keep working on.
I think it's been a double whammy with rent control because never in my career have I seen so many people offering their tenants cash for keys, and in turn tenants asking for it, and the amounts just keep going up.
Yeah, well, I think we also have to acknowledge that we do have an aging rental stock. I mean, our rental stock now is, I think 80% of it was built before 1980. And so again, we are seeing what's the result of that, or how is that playing itself out? I mean, older units getting older all the time, older buildings that require significant modernization, which requires major investment. And so we're seeing situations where obviously there are whether it's the need for vacant possession, or some talking about demolishing buildings, again, to put up greater density. Like if anyone demolishes a building, they're going to put more housing there in its place. But these are all very contentious issues. They become very divisive in the media. People get very, it's an emotional subject. I recognize that. But I think we have to acknowledge that our rental stock is quite old now, and nothing lasts forever. There's got to be a plan, a reasonable plan to address how we modernize, how we sort of improve these units. And no one wants to be displaced in their housing, but we have to acknowledge that just letting these buildings all, like freezing them all in time, that's not responsible. It makes no sense. You can't freeze them in time. They're going to keep getting older, and the need for them to require the requirement for significant upgrades and improvements is going to get more, and it's going to be more costly. And how do we deal with that? And if we have these really old buildings where we can put greater density on them, why wouldn't we want to do that? We need more housing. So again, we need to have more conversations, because some of these issues are just emerging, or they're becoming, they still may be more largely big city issues, but as we go forward, they're going to spread out. It's going to become something you're going to be seeing in more than just kind of the largest cities in Canada. So I think we have to have, again, be realistic about what our situation is, and say, look, it's not, we want to be fair to people. We want to treat people fairly, with respect, but at the same time, acknowledge that we have a really old rental housing stock, and just doing nothing is not a strategy. We don't, that doesn't work. So I think we have to be open and honest about what we need to do and the pathway to getting to a place where we can upgrade units, we can modernize them, and in some cases we can tear them down and build brand new ones because that is the path. That's the right path forward.
Mhm. Like I used to have student rentals, and to see the number of electronics my students have, because they kept on flipping the breakers, because I have a 100 amp panel, and there's you guys just an endless stuff being plugged in, and I think they were mining for Bitcoin too, so it's just like all these electricity hogs. And my
Yeah,
family,
that's
we actually have two Teslas, so so a house built in the '80s will not support any of this. Hence, I've had to
no,
upgrade my panel.
absolutely. And all these things come at significant cost, 100%,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
I've had to upgrade the serve, like I had to run a new line from my panel to my garage, and like so, if your tenants want in the 1980s building want a upgrades to electrical, then it's these things we need for some of these units we may need vacant possession.
Absolutely.
Now, how can one support FRPO or any like? There's so many landlords out there who want a voice, and I think guys we already are in agreement on what the changes are needed. How can someone support FRPO or any other organization you work for?
So, my message on that is always the same when I travel around and talk to people, and I say it's really important for um, anyone who's a landlord to be involved, get involved in a way that makes sense to them. And so, one of my mandates clearly in running two associations is to pitch people on membership, and I always do that. But even above that, I say, do what you think you can do, and what makes sense to you. Which means at the very sort of minimum, if there is an association in your community or your town that represents landlords, join it. Go talk to them. They can provide you with all kinds of information and advice. If you're a new landlord, especially, and you don't sort of know, there's a lot you don't know. If you go to these associations, they have meetings, and there are people there who have experienced what you're experiencing, and they can help you. They can give you advice. They can talk to you. So that's at that level. Of course, as we've been talking for the last little while, the work we do at Queen's Park with respect to Residential Tenancies Act, Landlord Tenant Board, all the development issues, we need support too. And so I would certainly say if there are people who are interested in getting involved and who are interested in what we're doing at Queen's Park or interested in what we're doing federally, there's a place for you at both of our groups. There is a place for you. But I know that for many people, their resources are limited. They can only do so much. So getting involved in something is better than getting involved in nothing. So for you, it means, I'm in Hamilton and I often go and speak to HDA, that's the Hamilton District Apartment Association. And if you say, I can get involved there, do it. It's not coming to me, but that's okay. I just think that's really important. The message I always convey to folks is, we depend on, yes, we serve our members, but we need your support and you need you to be with us. And so wherever way you think that works for you, some people want to get more involved in that. They want to attend meetings and be on committees and really engage and even come to meetings with politicians. And we love that. We need to hear voices from people who are on the ground, who are dealing with their, having to replace your panel because of all your students and like all these things you experience on a daily basis as a landlord. Politicians want to hear that, and I help facilitate. I understand, government. My biggest role is I'm kind of the translator between the members who I serve and government because I understand kind of how both of them talk, and my job is to kind of help facilitate those discussions and put conversations into language that both can maybe understand. But it's really critical, and elected officials want to hear from people who get their hands dirty every day and who are in the trenches. So whether that's at City Hall where you live, or whether it's reaching out to my organizations, either FRPO or CFAA, to say
Hmm.
I'd like to get involved. I'd love to hear from anybody who's interested in doing that. But please, we all benefit from working together, and we're stronger together. And voices are important. So if you can get involved, I would encourage you to do so at whatever level, whatever organization you think works for you and suits your needs.
I have so many questions. So I've been an HDA member for a decade, I think. And I
Yep.
see you guys have a golf tournament coming up, not coming up in July.
Yeah, yeah, we have a term, and we work with a great organization called Interval House. We've worked with them. We just actually surpassed $1 million raised for them over I think 17 years working with them.
Jeez.
They are Canada's first shelter for women and often children fleeing intimate partner violence. So it's an organization that we wish didn't exist or didn't need to exist, but it does. And so we've been working with them, as I said, for I think about 17 years. We have members who provide housing for some of their transitional housing for some of their clients as they're transitioning out of living in Interval House and they want to get back into the community. We provide funding, supports in other ways. There's a lot of great work that they do, but really, funding is for them is critical to do their work. I visited them, their shelter a few times just recently when we made the announcement. Mayor Chow was there, and we had a big check to present to say we've now surpassed $1 million raised. We often have someone from Interval House, a past client, come to our golf tournament and speak. And you can imagine after a golf tournament, it's often hard to get people's attention. They've had a few drinks and people are visiting with one another, and that's great. I'm up there talking, and it's hard for me to get people to be quiet. When the person from Interval House comes and speaks, you can hear a pin drop in the room. Everyone is silent. Their stories are so emotional. They talk about their journey. They talk about what happened to them, and they talk about when they needed help, Interval House was there for them, and it helped them rebuild their life, gave them supports, anything from clothing to wear to job interviews, presents for their kids, all kinds of other sort of supports that they offer. Interval House offers. You can just the emotion and the impact it has on everyone in that room. You walk out of there, and it's impossible not to be deeply affected and to say, like, we need to do everything we can to help this organization. So our golf tournament raises money for Interval House. We have members who, they will come to our events and say, like we have a social event in the fall, and Interval House was there, and they say, we didn't realize we want to get more involved. Like, we know you have the golf tournament, but as a company, we want to do our own fundraising or do our own, engagement with our own employees directly. And so we, of course, connect them with Interval House. So we've, there are a lot of great organizations who you can support and who are worthy of our support. As a society, but we've partnered with Interval House, and they're who we work with. So not to say we don't, we run food drives and do some other things, but the organization that we primarily sort of work with from a sort of philanthropic perspective is Interval House, and that's the golf tournament raised. All the monies raised at the golf tournament go to them.
I have two more questions because we're
Sure,
getting closer running out of time. Where can
no
people
problem.
learn more about CFAA and FRPO?
So the website for FRPO is FRPO.org. So I would encourage anyone to go there to learn more about what FRPO is doing. The CFAA website is harder to say because it's a bilingual URL. So I should be able to say that out to you, but I can't say it. So I don't know it off.
I
It's not as
have it in
easy as
front of me.
FRPO.org. Yeah,
It's
so I put that up on
CFAA dash
dash a
FCAPI.org.
yeah.
I'll have it in the show notes for anyone who's driving and can't write that down.
Perfect. Yeah. But both are go to our websites. They have information around upcoming events, what we're working on, what we're doing. And CFAA, we have an annual rental housing conference. This year it's in Vancouver, May 13 to 15. That's an opportunity for folks, especially out in that part of the country. It was in Toronto in 2024, Halifax in 2023. So we like to move it around. So Vancouver, the Sheridan Wall Center Hotel. And so we'll have great panels, great networking, great opportunities for people to engage. And so, I put that out there because that's our big annual event with CFAA that we do each year. And FRPO has a number of events, and you can find that all at FRPO.org in terms of what we're doing there. But great opportunities to get involved and to engage. And HDA does a lot of great events. All these organizations do their own events and do great events too. But from our perspective, that's the stuff that that's where you can get more information on what we're doing.
I've already blocked off July 22nd in my calendar for your golf tournament at Lionhead, which is a
That'd be
lovely
great.
golf course.
It's a great golf course. It's a great day. I'd love to see you there.
You mentioned something earlier, how Canadians are taking responsibility for themselves in the context of trying to take care of their financial security for their family.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts for today's real estate investor?
I'm not I'm not I'm not probably the best person to be giving advice to people who are real estate investors. I guess, but from where I sit and for with the people I talk to and the work that I do, I know it's still a great vertical. I know it's still a great, industry to be in. That said, I know it's been extremely challenging over the last number of years. I'm saying that, but you're selling all your units, and you're obviously, pretty savvy and know what's going on and know how challenging it is. So I guess my comment more is uh, probably a plea, which is we need great people to still be in this space. And I do think there are opportunities still to do well here and to provide housing, but also to provide to do well from an investment and financial point of view. Um, we need to do our job as advocates for industry to continue to make that better, to continue to sort of fight for a regulatory environment that does make people like you actually want to stay in this business or be in this business and not run from it. So that is our mandate, and I need to continue to do everything I can to get there, to be able to say to you, things are better. Government has done things that make it more attractive for you to be in this industry. So, and I take that responsibility seriously. Right? I can't wave a wand and make it happen, or else I would. But I think it's critical. It's vital to our country and to our that we have a strong industry that has a diverse group of people who are providing housing. We need large, we need medium, we need small, we need all of it. We need a great cross section of organizations and individuals who can provide rental housing to Canadians who need it. And investors, smaller sort of investors, or those who have sort of smaller portfolios, are a vital piece, like super critical to the entire housing continuum that we have. We need to really ensure that we don't totally gut this to the point where no one wants to do this at all, because I don't think that's positive for Canada. I don't think it's positive for rental housing in general. So my message is, continue to tell us what we should be doing. Continue to give us ideas. Continue to tell me. I'm happy to talk to people anytime. Continue to help me in the work we do in terms of what we should be advocating for, things that would help you, would continue to make this asset class appealing to you, because we need you. We need you to be here, and we need to be able to provide an environment that says to you, you are welcome here and you want to be here. So that's a tall order, but we aren't this is the big leagues. This isn't sort of amateur time. So I would say continue to feed ideas into us. It doesn't mean they're going to happen overnight, but we need to continue to hear from people who are on the ground, working every day hard to do what you do, to say, what are the things that we should be advocating for that will help you and either keep you here, or people who are considering where to invest, or what they should be doing to invest in rental housing. That would be my sort of parting message.
Thank you, Tony. And then one last time, FRPO.org is FRPO
Correct.
and
Yeah,
CFAA-FCAPI.org. Again, I'll have these in the show notes.
you got it.
Tony, thank you so much for doing this.
It's been my pleasure. It's been a great conversation with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to speaking with you again. And
I'll
thanks to all
see you
your
July
listeners.
22nd for sure.
I'll be there. I'll be there. I look forward to shaking your hand and to spending some time with you.
Looking forward to it. All right, friends, that wraps up another episode of the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. Hope you got as much out of this one as I did. Remember that whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, there's always something new to learn, and it's always about building that practical knowledge base that gets you closer to financial freedom. If you found value today, please do us a favor and leave us a review or a rating, share this episode with a friend, or better yet, join our community of real estate investors who are taking action and making moves. And hey, if there's a topic you want us to cover or have, there's a certain guest you'd like us to have on the show, drop me a line. My DMs are open on social media. Reply to this email that this have arrived on. I'm not hard to find. We're all about getting you the unfiltered truth to help you on your journey. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay smart, stay curious, and keep building that future. Catch you later.